Hello, and welcome to All the Grief, a regular podcast for all those who have been touched by grief. We are your hosts. I am Rebecca Luttrell.
And I am Andrea Giron Mathern. We are two friends, a therapist, and a social scientist, both highly sensitive fellow grievers, here to share our hearts as we talk about all the grief. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, Andrea.
I'm always wanting to say good morning to you first.
Okay, I'll let you. Let me ask you how your heart is this morning.
My heart feels really full. Yesterday, Bryce's not insistence, but really encouragement was like, take the boys skiing, just take the day, take them skiing. And so I asked the boys and they were totally into it. We went and it was just so precious. It was a beautiful day. I'm a bratty Colorado skier. I'm like, if it's cold, if it's windy, if there's anything inclement, I'm like, I'm not getting out there. But it was beautiful. It was we got a little bit of fresh snow. The sun came out. It was gorgeous. There were no crowds. I mean, it was such a beautiful day. And the boys were so confident and just joyful on the mountain. And it's just this moment, those moments as a parent where you just realize, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And you can't help but have a little bit of a countdown of you see, a group of teenage boys go by you without their mom. And you're like, how many of these, snow days do I have where it's cuddly and it's just precious and, small and before they do what they're supposed to do and gain their independence. But I feel so grateful that we chose homeschooling, that it was right for us. And I have you and other homeschool moms who just showed me how it could be. And I just feel so grateful for these ample time I get with them. It was a day that just made my heart really full. Yeah. So I'm still have overflow.
That's great. Great.
How is your heart?
Kind of solemn or somber. I don't know what the word is, but I mean, I find myself in this really pensive place this morning. And, I think it's just things that I sort of constantly wrestle with philosophically and then long for conversation to help me sort things out that sometimes are just unsortable. So I'm trying to just hang in the unknown and the uncertainty of things that, just feel hard in the world right now, I think. It's just a lot. And I'm sure we'll touch on some of it in this conversation. So I'm not going to over talk it now, but just report that my heart feels a little somber. And I know that there's a path to also feeling different things. And so I'm like, oh, well, let's not rush it away too quickly. Let's let myself just feel that and hear that for now. So yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I mean, I know I can relate to that feeling and these sort of I don't know, really highs or not really highs. You take what you can get and then these really low lows. And so, I think it's very fitting to have our guest today, who is a return guest. And we're both really excited to have him back. We sort of jokingly named him our resident poet on his last visit, but then we were like, but really, we want you to come back at least a couple times a year. So we're so lucky. Moudi Sbeity is a Lebanese-American author, poet, and transpersonal psychotherapist. Born in Texas and raised in Lebanon, he moved to the United States at the age of 18 as an evacuee following the 2006 July War. In Utah, he founded and operated Laziz Kitchen, a Lebanese restaurant celebrated by the New York Times as the future of queer dining. He was also named a plaintiff in Kitchen v. Herbert, the landmark case that brought marriage equality to Utah and the 10th Circuit states in 2014. As a lifelong stutterer, he is passionate about writing and poetry as practices in fluency and self-expression. He has 2 books coming out this year in 2026. Habibi Means Beloved, which is a memoir on growing up queer and stuttering in Lebanon and his eventual evacuation to the United States. He also has Alhamdulillah Anyway, a poetry collection that addresses language, land, and war in relation to Lebanon and Palestine. You can find Moudi at his website, moudisbeity.com, or learn more about his psychotherapy practice at huwacounseling.com. Everything will be in our show notes. Welcome back to All the Grief, Moudi.
Thank you. It's great to be here and to see you again, both Rebecca and Andrea.
We're so glad. How is your heart this morning?
Man, my heart feels a bit heavy today. to be honest. I was just listening to voice notes from my family on WhatsApp group where they are as being targeted currently. So they all had to leave and just checking in on whether they've been impacted or not. It's very sort of there's a cognitive dissonance that happens here that they're saying we're going to go for an hour. Once the strike is done, we'll return
Mm,
home while I get to be here and just enjoy this beautiful, gorgeous day
mhm,
in Boulder. So yeah, my heart feels a bit heavy today.
Yeah,
mhm,
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I wrote to you as we were preparing for this interview. We booked just kind of like, there's plenty of grief in the world for us to talk about. We'll figure out a topic when we get there. And then, in just the 10 days since, before we're meeting right now, the US has expanded their war and is now
Mhm,
bombing Lebanon and Beirut. And you immediately, of course, came into my heart and my mind, and Rebecca's as well, of just things, we often talk in grief like, you don't want to, I really try hard not to say, like, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine that happening. It's like
mhm,
sometimes, like, I just don't want to imagine. I don't want to imagine what it's like to lose a child. I don't want to imagine. But sometimes when I see these images of war and truly never ever seen anything like that, never had family in a war zone, never ever seen an explosion or heard an explosion, it is very hard to actually imagine it. And I think even if I could, my imagination would come up short of
mhm,
the just every sense impact, both sort of like our emotional sensibilities and our physical senses of what's happening. So I don't think I knew what to say. I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking about you
mhm.
and I love you and in your
mhm,
family, and whoever your Habibi is in Lebanon and Beirut are just finding a way to find some sort of safety in this atrocity.
Thank you. They are all currently safe, which I'm grateful for. And as you said, it's hard to imagine it. We don't want to imagine it, and yet we are here because we have imagined it.
Yeah.
mm. Wow,
We've
yeah.
thought it, we've imagined it, and so we've created it.
All right, we'll just start there. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Mhm,
Well, the last time that you were on, we always start with our guests about their grief origin story. And we've been so lucky to speak with you before, so we don't have to go back there. And we definitely will put in the show notes for everybody linking to your first interview and the episode that we aired with you that entails that. But obviously, like the trauma of today
mhm,
and
Mhm.
the grief that you're dealing with has so much to do with your grief origin story. So just kind of wondering how all of these worlds and moments are coming together for you right now. Though you are here and you are safe, I imagine part of you is also still back in much more traumatic times when you were closer to that type of danger than you are at this moment.
Mm. Yes, war is a grief origin story for me in um, multiple poetic ways, not just the physicality, but um, I warred with myself
Yeah.
for stuttering severely as a kid and for being queer and so on and so forth. I had a friend reach out to me this week and ask me whether or not I've been involved in a grief ritual and if I have any suggestions on what to do and what not. And I somewhat facetiously replied, my whole life is a grief
mm,
ritual.
mm,
And there's a truth in that, I think, for all of us, and that grief is so connected to impermanence and to loss. And every second that we breathe is a second that we've already lost in some sense.
mm,
And so we're continually engaging in some kind of grief um, to varying degrees, whether it's a loss of a home or a person or an identity or a job. But I find that grief brings me to gratitude fairly quickly these days.
Mm.
mhm.
I think from the bottom ground of grief, where gratitude can then sprout.
Yeah. Can you say more about that? Because it feels rare that when we're talking to someone, the grief is just like right here. Sometimes people are
Mm.
talking from grief that's a year ago or something, and they've kind of metabolized it, but you're in this process, I imagine, in this moment. And how does that process happen for you?
A lot of practice in daily journaling for me has helped me come to this ground inside, and then meditation practice too. But I also don't want to ignore a very important cultural piece. The title of the poetry book is Alhamdulillah anyway, and Alhamdulillah means gratitude be to Allah, is how it can be translated. And it's often said, when you drink water, when you have a meal, when someone asks you, "How are you?" you just say, "Gratitude be to the divine."
Hmm.
But it is also said in times of very in times of great despair and grief. For instance, in 2023, I saw a video of a missile hit a man's home in Gaza, and he was just filled with like scorch marks and dust, and all he could say was Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah.
Mm.
And more recently,
Hmm.
talking with my mom on the phone, concerned about what's going on, and I actually have a poem about this. All she could say was, Alhamdulillah, we're still alive. And without going into too much detail here, I think the word itself has a lot of wisdom. Al from Alhamdulillah means the, and that is a definitive article that points to the existence of something.
Hmm.
So it's not just gratitude be to Allah, but it's the gratitude. So it's the gratitude of all gratitudes. It's the
Mm.
essence of gratitude. And
Hmm.
then if we etymologically step into the word Allah from a Sufi perspective, it means the very breath, or the everything, nothingness that exists within a single breath. And so the gratitude we give is for breathing. So even when things go wrong, the fact that I'm still breathing is enough for me to be grateful. It could be otherwise.
Uh,
I
Go
wish I
on.
could pass the
I
Kleenex
Pass
for
the
you.
tissue. It's okay.
But it's quite miraculous that we exist at all. It's just incredible that we're here, and uh, we get to experience pain and sorrow and joy and love and loss. And we know that we're here for a very short time. I mean, to us, it feels like forever, but really, it's a
Hmm.
very short time. So, isn't it beautiful that something exists rather than nothing at all?
Yeah. Yeah, no, actually read your Substack where you're breaking apart the etymology of the word, and I really appreciated that, but just hearing you speak it here, I was just like you're cracking my heart open. And just, even a sorrow that it sort of speaks to a people and a culture that you would have a word that would encompass that, and like a sorrow that I don't know a word like that I come from or that we would say to have a certain reverence for like the
Mm.
gratitude for existence, and that I had to kind of be an archaeologist of my own heart to figure out some version of that for myself. And kind of, I remember thinking, would I choose this? Like there was a point in my life where I was in a lot of suffering, and I was like, if someone was like, this is going to be a thing that's going to happen in your life, are you sure you want to go? And I was like, I actually still would choose this. And that was like this real moment of that sort of gratitude of like, this is life. Like, this is part of that. And still, I struggle just absolutely. I mean, when you say end war, I'm like, oh, like, I'm like, no, that shouldn't be. Like, there's just this huge, it's like this comes from people who are not in that gratitude, who have the capacity to hurt others, who have the capacity to not see our interconnection and have no reverence for life in that way. So that's where I really struggle. And if you have the magic that helps me reconcile that, please. But I just really struggle with that feeling of what shouldn't be. And that I don't want to hold war in my own heart around the people who create war. Like, I'm like, I
Mm.
don't want to continue the energy of war. So I don't want to hold hate in my heart, but I also am angry and
Mm.
heartbroken and want it to be different. And I don't know how to make it different except, the part of me that just wants to scream and yell and tell them they're wrong. Yeah. So,
Every day. I
Yeah.
want to scream and yell every day.
Yeah. Mm.
Everything you said is true. War shouldn't be,
Mhm.
and yet it is, right? And I don't want hatred in my heart because I don't want to further division. And yet sometimes I feel it. So I don't deny myself that experience. I just know how to not let it become all of me.
Mm.
So I feel the anger, and then what do I do with this anger? I write poems, I talk to lovely friends that are in the same heart space. I cry, I grieve, I, you know, want to wail at the sky and say, "Why do you let this happen?" And the response comes back always, "Why do you let this happen?
Mm.
Why do we let this happen?" Maybe it's naive of me to think this way, but I want to say that these people that wage wars and inflict harm are acting from a very limited understanding of themselves, which means this is not who they are. I can very quickly access forgiveness in my heart only because I'm more focused on the long term view of how else we can heal and create a world fit for everyone.
Mm.
If I sit here and stew and hate for someone who I know is acting from a small place inside of them, then I don't help the situation. So that even if my family were to die today, and of course I would be very upset and in deep grief and I would unravel in thousands of ways, I haven't yet been able to feel intense hatred or enmity to anyone. Even the people we think of are the worst of the worst.
Mm.
Yeah, in so many ways, I mean, it's beautiful. The language is so beautiful. Some languages I love the way they fall. They come out of a
Mm.
mouth and the way they fall on you. Other languages are a little more like pow, pow, pow. Um, so, so I love the way it falls on the ears and on the soul to hear it and the depth of, yeah, understanding the etymology of each piece of the word and where it came from to be this whole idea, not just a word, is so beautiful. And I think we are three people whose hearts are sort of welded together somehow in the same way from brutality and loss in very different ways that we got here, but somehow welded together by love and still trying to beat fully in that space of loving. And it is really difficult. It is difficult. Even if I don't find hatred in my heart, I'm like, I don't know if I've ever really hated someone. I'm not sure I understand it like enough. But I don't think so. I really don't think so. I struggle in the understanding of brutality. Like, I understand hurt people. And I know it's such a cliche, but it is so true. It's like we hurt people from our own wounds. But my goodness, it's just like I struggle with like the lengths to which that harm can be done without, and I don't know, maybe people are having an internal reckoning and not being in spaces or wanting to be the one whose internal reckoning takes the ire for asking things to stop or slow down. I don't know. I shouldn't say that I know, but I think that's the part that's hard. And especially as a parent, I mean, we don't watch the news or anything. So my boys don't quite understand everything, but we do read like accurate histories and we talk about what's going on. And it's hard to talk to them about why some of these things happen. So it's like, I hear you and it's like landing in my heart in such a beautiful way. And I just want to honor like the difficulty of like, maybe it's just like the human in me really wants to just understand. If I could understand the lengths of brutality that people will go to, maybe I could forgive them, but maybe I don't need to understand. I don't think they're seeking my forgiveness. I don't think they need my forgiveness. I don't,
Mm.
Mm.
but maybe it could, I don't know, give me a sense of peace to understand it.
What's there to understand about brutality? It's hard to make sense of it. The one thing I can think of is ignorance, right? If I am ignorant in the sense of I haven't yet realized my interconnectedness with all of life, then I act in harmful ways. And as cliche as hurt people sounds, maybe it's also true that healed people hurt people. I could be healed in some way and yet not aware of my actions and how I show up. I could
Mhm.
be self healed in an isolated way. And I don't want to go into what healed is and what it means, but you know, we know people who are healed in some way or are in their healing journey and still cause harm. I think we are bound to cause harm. It's just when we walk on the earth, we're having an impact, and we can't not walk on the earth. So
Mm.
so we inadvertently cause harm. Are we aware of how we're showing up and from where our speech and actions come from? And then can we channel our hurt and our anger and this rage at injustice into ways that are actually helpful?
Mm.
Yeah, and I heard you said a thing that is like what so like something pinged in my heart when you were saying it. You were like that choice between do I sit and think about how could someone do this, feeling rage towards them, feeling whatever, or do I totally paraphrasing, but like spend my energy thinking about how do we make the world that we actually want and like how do we move towards that? And I love that. So I want to hear the ways that you imagine that and the way so let's imagine
Mm.
something different
Yeah.
together.
Uh, Poetry and writing for me are truly, truly very powerful tools to imagine ourselves into this future that we know is possible. One, writing helps me process through my experience so that I'm not holding on to them. You said something about being an archaeologist of your heart. I've often said that writing is an archaeology of experience, and the pen is our digging tool. And
Mm,
we dig through our past to make sense of what happened to us and perhaps even rewrite the narrative. And then we find gems along the way. And this way, writing is a way we can sit with the breadth and the depth of our experience. And then poetry. So the Greek word for poetry, poesis, means to make or to create. And so what are we creating? Something beautiful from the life we have, right?
mm,
Or something real or something poignant. And so the poem holds the nuance and the complexity and the specificity of what it means to be a hurting human or to just be alive. And they become companions. That's where I channel my energy is into a poem or onto the page. And then I get to share it with people, and they become oases of rest in a world that seems to be very disturbed.
Mm.
mhm, mhm.
I
And I'm
love
aware that you also I mean, you recently had maybe a workshop or something that was around poetry and war.
Mhm.
So how do you teach people to channel that? I mean, are people kind of like, "Oh, I think I'm a poet, help me get better," or are they like, "I can't write, but I'm here." Yeah.
Everyone's a poet.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are certain academic understandings of what poetry is, and there are niches, but to me, being a poet is embodying a perspective and an orientation towards the world. So I'm looking at something from a poetic perspective, which means I know that I'm only seeing an element of experience and not all of it. And so there's always a mysterious so we can all embody that poetic orientation so that a headline can be read as a poem. But deeper still, just the ability to give language or to put our experience to words helps us express ourselves in ways in which we can communicate across division. And a poem does that really effectively, I think.
Hmm.
Mm.
Mhm.
It is beautiful. It's hard to tell sometimes the way our, like, information sources get to us, if
Mm.
there is, like, a resurgence of poetry in the world or if it's just whatever my different algorithms are telling me, like, "Oh, we know she'll spend a second, like, reading or listening to this person read poem." But either way, I feel it's really beautiful. My mom was a school teacher and a principal for, decades, and I remember she spent a lot of time teaching us I mean, reading to us and writing with us, but reading a lot of poetry to us because it just felt was so important that we had a value for poetry and that it was
Mhm.
something that was sort of not valued in the same way as in the same way that maybe writing, being a novelist was or something like that. And so I think of it often when I make sure my boys have poetry that is read, that we read to them, or they pick up poetry books from their bookshelf, and I love to see it, just hear it more often. And so I'm always grateful when you either, yeah, your Substack, if folks are not subscribed, they definitely should. You are prolific. It's incredible. And hearing that it's part of your process, of your I imagine this isn't your journal, so it's like you have your journal and then do things from your journal sort of are the seeds of what sometimes become these beautiful musings and these beautiful poems?
They at times come from my journal. At times they come when I'm on a run and a poem comes and then I
Mm.
focus on that. Or when sitting zazen, I'll focus on a line and then I'll compose a poem in my head while I'm sitting on the cushion or in the bathtub. I'm always attuning myself to wherever the poem is coming from.
Mm.
I'm always in a conversation with the muse or with God, you could
Mhm.
say. It is a resting place for me. When I can focus on composing a poem, I'm in a way sort of opening up the veil or the world and stepping into something very precious and beautiful and attentive and full of awe. And for the time when I'm composing a poem, I exist as multitudes. And so I'm not dwelling on the war or dwelling on my little worries, you know, should
Mhm.
I go to the gym? What am I going to do tomorrow? What's going to happen the next day? It really becomes a place where I inhabit just ecstatic largeness. And you can even hear me now having difficulty expressing it because it is ineffable.
Mm, that's beautiful. It reminds me, I don't know if Rebecca's thinking of this, but just the different ways that people talk about creativity and muses and divinity and like whatever people's cosmology is, but this way in which some people accept the charge to be a conduit of this creativity and these beautiful messages of the heart
Mm.
and of that energy that binds us all, like these poems that even if I don't have family in a war-torn country, I can identify or I can feel the humanity, I can feel the humanness, I can feel the sorrow and love and grief and hope in a poem, even if it's something I haven't personally experienced. And so it just creates this way of knowing you, but knowing myself more deeply.
Hmm. It goes from the personal to the universal pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I know last time we talked, you had like 3 poems that we could choose from, and one of them was about war. I feel like sad that we didn't choose that one, but it felt relevant that we chose the home one, and they're all beautiful. But I was curious if you brought any poems today that you wanted to read or
I did, yeah. So the way my mind works is as I'm talking to someone, poems pop up in my head in relationship to what the topic is. And so there's been several that have come to me. I could share just sort of checking in within myself about where to go with a poem. Um, I'll share one titled The Village House. It's about war. I think war and grief are a theme that show up in my poems quite often. This is a poem about our village home, and our village home is still intact, but I was also thinking about all the homes in the village that got decimated. The village house. The village house is old, but the arches still stand like the ready wings of a bird that could lift the stone temple to the sky. We stood under them on the veranda overlooking the garden, peace bringing along their smooth flutter, an invitation to walk through and again find ourselves sitting under the olive trees. Embroidered blankets spread between us, passing trayfuls of figs and stories, Arabic lingering in droplets on our lips from the hope we poured into small glass teacups. The arches have begun to crumble, resembling nothing more than clipped wings. Now that peace has fled the country, now that the olive trees have been uprooted, and no one gathers in the garden anymore. No one is there to sing.
Hmm. I mean, it's beautiful. I just like closed my eyes just to take in the imagery and the words and, yeah, just be there for a moment. So
Mhm.
thank you for bringing us all there with your
Yeah,
poetry.
thank you.
Hmm. My heart needs a second.
Yeah.
You can have 2 seconds.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It feels like such a I mean, it is a real-time thing to be reconciling, like, that to even be in a country and from a country that is causing so much harm within its own borders and then elsewhere in the world, and to just, yeah, feel this sense of, like, I want a different world to be possible, and I mean, I believe we're capable of something different, but we're also capable of exactly this. And so, is this just our destiny to continue to do these cycles of harm and, genocides, decimating cultures? And I always maintain that that's something within ourselves that is, like you said, Andrea, like the sort of like love that welds our hearts together and tries to keep connected to that in the space of these atrocities. But I was just thinking this morning about, like, all these areas of focus that feel really painful right now. Like, I mean, and the things in our own country, and then we start to branch out and it's like the genocides, the wars, and I'll break if I let in too much of the outrage. But then I think I worry a lot, and kind of where I'm going with this, like, meandering is like, I think that I worry sometimes about, like, in relative comfort in this moment, that it's like a luxury to be able to be like, well, I can't take in all that outrage. And so I'm going to think about how to bring love to the world. And I want to believe that that is useful and good and what our world needs, making spaces for grief, making spaces in this podcast to have conversations about things, to be willing to lean into the hard places, have people share their stories. And there's this constant feeling of like, I don't know that I'll ever feel like I can do enough and that I'm doing enough. And that feels really hard. And it's like, I think today I was just like, God, what's enough? We know so much that we could be attending to, and it feels impossible for me to attend to everything in the way that I would really want to. So I am just laying this on the altar of our conversation. I mean, it feels like we have resonant hearts, and like, how do you decide what is enough, or that I'm showing up the best I can in this day, and kind of have that self-compassion and not, yeah, because I can find myself becoming self-aggressive where I'm like, well, you're not doing this and you're not doing that. And you know,
Yeah. Why haven't you yet saved us all, Rebecca? Clock is
cool.
ticking. No, it's we are so beautiful and big and limited, right? We
Hmm.
can only do so much. I just want to say you're phrasing the altar of our conversation is beautiful, and it is, a very sacred, holy place that we get to have this conversation, and this too adds, I think, to what we can do. This kind of helplessness, I think, is so common. We can only do so much. The guilt walks with me, A recent poem I posted, I talked about how I get to go on this beautiful walk when the sun is rising and the birds are chirping. And I'm thinking of my family who wake up to different sounds, a different sunrise, and they don't get to go on a walk. But what am I supposed to do, right? Sit at home in a ball of despair 24/7? That doesn't serve anybody. Can we still find places of pleasure and joy in our everyday and allow it all in?
Mm.
In a fun way, I like to think of the word allow as all and ow, right?
Hmm.
It's all coming into our heart and it hurts.
Hmm.
It hurts, but let it hurt. And
Hmm.
maybe we can hurt together and cry together and grieve together.
Mm.
But this is a lot larger than all three of us, and we
Mm.
can only attend to the small ways that we know how.
Yeah, it keeps reminding me. I mean, that's beautiful. Thank you both. It keeps reminding me, Rebecca, of we're reading a book together and doing a book study. And in it, the author's talking about it's a book about Mary Magdalene and talking about a reorienting to her spiritual path and spiritual ascension that was left out of any sort of Christianity that any of the people in this book study came to understand or know. And one of these doorways that she goes through, the author phrases them as powers, as ignorance. But she phrases that as like we all forget. We forget our own
Mm.
divinity. We forget our own precious goodness within ourselves. And we forget we have access to it. We forget that that's where we can make our decisions from. We forget that that is the essence of every single person, right? That that divinity, that divine light exists within everyone. It is ignorance, and we may have moments of ignorance. We may have a life full of ignorance, but it's from that place, one of the places that from there that we make really hurtful choices. And I think about trying to sort of pull together all these different arms of our conversation, like understanding that people are making choices that are really hard to comprehend and at a scale and a level and a brutality that, like, yes, there is no sense making of it. Like, there is no way to make sense of it. And things that have really turned my world upside down in a way, like the Epstein files has really shaken me to a place where it's just, I have days where I feel like everything's not going to be okay. And that is not like a way I orient to life. And so I think listening, I think sometimes, especially you're raising little people and you want to raise them with understanding the goodness of their own heart, and you want to raise them understanding that every person they encounter has that same goodness within them, reckoning with all of the devastation that's happening all the time. And I think some days it's like what I can do is like look at ignorance within myself. Like, how am I talking to myself today? How am I looking at myself in the mirror today? In what ways am I not remembering my own goodness and touching back into my own divinity? And what ways, you said it, Rebecca, in what ways am I carrying war in my heart for
Mm.
myself? And some
Mhm.
days that may be like the only thing I can do. It's like today I can be really kind to myself. I don't know.
I think you're naming something so important, Andrea. Thank you. And I think you've said a version of it as well, Moody, where it's sort of that idea of, I forget what you had said, Moody, but it made me think of, I remember reading work where someone was like working with addiction. And then he was like, oh, the addicts do this and he was like, wait. He was noticing there were things in his life that he was sort of addicted to. And while they might not be a drug or they might not be causing harm in his family, but it was like this addict part of me that is constantly also searching for something to make myself feel better. I mean, yeah, when I can just shrink it back down. And that is why it was sort of a moment for me. I think it was after October 7th. And I was like, oh, I have war in my heart. There's a way that I am really angry at some people in my immediate life. And how am I not going to perpetuate that? But it was more just like, all I can do is like be responsible for this me. And I do see that, I see people angry at the political situation right now, but then they're like hating their friend who has a different political ideology. And it's like, we're just doing this to each other. It's sad. I think it takes a skill to figure out, how do I hold anger? I mean, of course, I feel frustrated that people didn't see that this was possible and made decisions and whatever. But I also know it's complicated. But it's complicated to say it's okay that I feel angry. And of course, I'm like, this shouldn't be happening. And I don't want to like perpetuate war. So, and I don't want to bypass, and I don't want to perpetuate war. It's like I stay in this loop sometimes of like, I don't want to just be like, nothing I can do about it. I just like, you're right, Moody. I can't save the world. Great. I'm going to go shopping. It's like, but to think about like, well, what are ways that I actually am colluding with the system? What are the ways that I'm complicit? And how do I just start to clean that up and just be the change you want to see in the world?
Well, something you said resonates, and this is something I discuss in my memoir, is that there is a war inside of us. There may always be a war inside of us. There's some kind of friction or tension, and to be in a relationship is to have our needs sort of at times butt heads. So it would be unrealistic of me to imagine I'm going to arrive at this place where I no longer experience struggle with myself or trouble in my life. So, in this poetic sense, there's always a war happening inside of us, where it then becomes dangerous if we're so unaware of it that we project it outside of us. So then I see someone as my enemy, or I see a part of me as my enemy. So here's the invitation that while there are these frictions and tensions and wars, can I be with them and can I be non reactive? Can I then exercise my choice in what I do with these feelings? There's a poem I posted recently that kind of speaks to this, and it went like a tiny bit viral. It's titled "Instead of War, the Poet Hugs Two Donkeys." Right. So I have a war inside of me. There's clearly a war happening in the world. And what does the poet choose to do? To hug two donkeys, because that seems more worth my time rather than being at a war with myself or with someone else.
Mhm.
Hugging
Mm.
donkeys is always the better choice.
Always the
Yes.
choice.
Yes. Yeah.
Moody, I'd love to see what your mind and soul have conjured up if there's another poem that's asking to be read.
Yeah. I'll read the donkey poem.
Beautiful.
All right. Instead of war, the poet hugs two donkeys, not one, but two, both wiser than the men of nations. Soft as sand and just as dusty, they touched their nose to mine as if a kiss, earnest with those down gazing eyes. They had no knowledge of the war today, this morning, did not know of the bombed school full of little girls. But if they did, surely they would have wept, which is to say, less of the men who shuffle their clothed feet between their gilded, dust-free rooms, who hold guilt in their eyes hard as stones. Have you met anyone who has spent time with those gentle friends, who nuzzled their hand in between those patient ears, who patted the donkey's back and inhaled the sweet gift of manure, and still insisted on war? It is impossible then to focus on the wrong things, handsome balances and wielding tongues. True harmony is made of simpler things, dirty hooves and fragrant odes, and the grasses that feed us all and are soon to claim us each, without difference, without mercy.
Thank you for that.
Also, I really do actually love donkeys.
Me too. I love donkeys. Yes. It's my dream to have a backyard farm with at least two donkeys.
Oh God, yes. I know, I know. And then I even looked because they have miniature donkeys and they're not like miniature
Mm.
horses. No offense to miniature horses, but they literally look like just miniature donkeys. And so I was like, did all this research about getting one in the city and how much you need, but they need to. They need to. My husband was like, you're so fucking crazy. I'm like, have you seen a miniature donkey? Ah, love them.
There's there's a poem by Rumi titled "You Sweep the Floor,"
Mm.
and he talks
Mm.
about Shams. If you know who Shams is, okay. Very quick story. Rumi was an Islamic scholar before he was a poet, and Shams was a traveling Sufi dervish. And Shams encountered Rumi, and without going into details, they sort of became fast, intimate friends. I think they were
Oh,
lovers, but
yeah.
that depends on who you're talking to. And so they spent the next few years in Rumi's home, locked up in his study, talking about religion and spirituality and God and whatnot. And at one point, Shams either gets killed or driven away. And that's when Rumi becomes the poet we know. It's through his
Mm.
grief
Mm.
that he became the Rumi that we know. Now, Shams also means sun in Arabic, like the sun. Not sun as in child, but sun as in the planet, the star. And in this poem, he talks about Shams as his heart donkey that can be strong enough to pull him and take him. Right. And so to think of the heart as a donkey and this like very loyal, persistent, patient beating donkey in our chest that
Oh,
just keeps on taking us forward.
oh, oh my gosh. And I'm gonna now call my heart donkey.
I will say I have a stuffed donkey that I sleep with every night. And I've named him Shems.
Oh my God, that's so perfect. That's so perfect.
That's amazing.
Off topic, but apparently a friend of mine said there is this donkey rescue, I think north of Denver. Have you been there? She
I
just
haven't
went.
yet. Yeah.
Okay. She just went. She was like, Andrea, you have to go. I was like,
Where are they rescuing donkeys
who
from?
is mistreating a donkey? I'm just like, I'm so sorry. Why do donkeys need rescue? I'm imagining there are people like me who are like, I want to be a backyard farmer. And then they're like, this donkey got really big. That's what I'm imagining. But she said it's amazing. She said it's amazing. So maybe we
That's
should
so
all have
sweet.
like a fucking date and go to the donkey rescue.
Can
Yes,
we? Okay.
There's a donkey race in Leadville every summer, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of burros, and they run with their friends, their companions, and there's a 5K and a 10K. Yeah.
Do you run, the humans run with the
Yes.
donkeys?
Can you borrow a donkey and run with it? Or you have to
Yes.
have a donkey to enter?
I'm not sure,
I'm
but
sorry
I
that we're
read
like,
a book titled Running with Sherman, and this guy talks about how he rescued a donkey and took him to the race. But he says they're very hard to train. They're very stubborn. You're right.
I did like
Yeah.
in the poem, it's like, we've got a donkey who we all think of as asses and like really stubborn and, and comparing them to these guilt stone-eyed people making these choices. I loved the imagery between those two. Because I was like, give me a stubborn donkey anytime.
When we conclude, I'll conclude with a poem titled Heart Donkey.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, I encountered my first donkey in real life. I was in it was after I had graduated from Naropa, but one of the therapists that I was leading a small supervision group with, she was a equine therapist, and she was like, oh, we should go to my farm one time with everyone. And I was like, oh, cool. We'll do equine therapy and I'll see how the horses respond to me and whatever. And I did not know I was going to fall in love with donkeys that day. But she had a donkey on the farm and I was just like, oh, who cares about the horses? This sweet soul. I was like, I can't leave. Every time that I would walk away, he would start making noises. And I was like, I will stay with you. I was like, oh, whatever my story is about horses, those are not my animals. I'm a donkey person from here on out.
I love that. Mine, I've always loved them. I have no idea why. My parents used to live in Loveland, and not the ski one south of Fort Collins, and they lived right on the edge. So it was all farmland. And I was leaving their house coming back to Denver, and you drive out this county road, and there was in this fucking field a donkey walking with a cow, and they were both miniatures. I fucking lost my mind. I pulled over. I was like, oh my God, I got them to come over the fence. I'm fucking crying. I'm just like, nobody's here to see this. And it was a panda cow. So there's these cows that sometimes come out with the exact markings of a panda bear. So it's a miniature panda cow with a miniature donkey. I was like, have I died? And they were just like, here you go, Andrea. You get to go and be best friends with a miniature cow and a miniature donkey. It was up there, top 5 moments of my life. Before cell phones, I couldn't fucking video it. It just lives in my heart. And I thought it wasn't real, where I had to Google, are there really panda cows? Because
are they friends
do they
with
become
miniature
friends with miniature donkeys? Anyway, it was the greatest moment of my life.
Anyone can become friends with a donkey.
They could change the world.
But here's such a bright example of where we can focus our attention.
Yeah.
On the exquisite, beautiful, mysterious things of this world, instead of on how are we going to fight each other and who's going to win.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The grass will win in the end.
And the beautiful, if our conversation is an altar, and sort of those of us who grew up going to something like a church or, was the beautiful way that our conversation has gone through heartache and confusion, and how do I reconcile this to smiling tears of joy over donkeys? It's just, it is in these moments. It is in these moments. And if more of us can just have conversations that we allow to move through all of that complexity.
Yeah, we can hold both at the same time, grief and gratitude.
Absolutely.
In fact, they can't exist without each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I let us just like be luxurious with time. I'm gonna say that, but that I want before we do our sort of closing.
Mm.
I don't know, should we do the closing and then the poem or the poem and then the closing?
I'd love maybe to end on a poem. It sounds beautiful to
Okay.
me.
Okay. So we've been doing question. We have friends Arena Green and Brianna Rose that did this deck called Grief Planet, and they have these conversation cards in them that are questions about grief. And so I've just been pulling a grief card and kind of ending with these questions. So today, the card is there anything you were taught about grief and loss that you now realize isn't true for you? Andrea.
I think for a long time I thought grief and loss were really connected to a person dying. And my grief origin story was my dad dying, and that was so significant to me. But in integrating that grief and that love and that gratitude that he was my father, I was so lucky. All the other ways that I've been grieving in my life and all the other ways that I've lost things. And I love this conversation because it really just is a reminder of like it is grief and loss, and it's outside of necessarily just a human life lost or a pet loss. But there are these little moments. And like you, Rebecca, all those griefy things and all that loss I've experienced in my life, like would I exchange 100 of them for this hour with you three, with you two? Never, never. So it's all beautiful. And that doesn't mean it's not difficult or that things shouldn't have happened. I think that too is like you can experience life. And I think there's this way that in my family, like religion has played this role of like, well, it was all God's plan. And it's like some shit really shouldn't happen, but that doesn't make my life unworthy of this moment. So
Hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moody, how about you?
Goodness, there's, I think, a lot of misinformation about grief. What comes to mind is that it is required or expected or even possible to get over grief. And if that were the case, this podcast wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Right? Uh, Loneliness and sadness are companions. They're friends, actually. They're here to teach us
Mm,
something, and they stay with us at least until we die. I don't know what happens after, but at least until we
mm,
die,
mhm.
grief is a teacher and a companion, not something we get over, but we learn to be with.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I love that there aren't just a companion, but a friend. And those of us that have deep friendships, like not every moment with our friend do we love. Like sometimes, like, my God, are you being this human that I
Yeah,
could totally have predicted you to be? And I sure love you, but God.
get out of here, grief.
Yeah, so how I would answer this is like, I mean, it actually brings up for me sort of this memory of when my grandmother died and I wasn't close to her. I feel closer to her in her death than I felt in life. She was very angry by the time I came around, and so it was hard to have relationship or connection with her. And then now I know her whole life story and I'm like, damn it. Why didn't anyone tell me that? Because I would have loved to have gotten to know her in a way that people were kind of blocking access to that by not sharing the bigger story. But I remember that my mom and her sister didn't cry. And I think that relationship had been a really hard one for them as the daughters of this woman. And it's up for me right now. I'm thinking about it and I'm like, I think I learned that there was like this ideal of like, you could get to a place where you just would be able to not cry or have grief about loss. And I carried that around kind of like before I had experienced grief acutely in my own life, sort of like, you're crying about your grief. Like it was really shitty. Like I really felt you haven't realized yet that you should just be okay. We all die. It's going to be fine. Like you'll be fine. And I didn't even realize that was a lesson I was walking around with. Like I just thought it was a truth. And then when I felt my own grief when my dad died, which was really the event, and we had a hard relationship, but there was like a younger me that was really grieving for when we had lost connection so many years prior. And suddenly recognizing now that I can feel it and see it, there's nothing I can do about it. Like I wish I could have told him in my life, I hold this grief that we're not connected. I didn't even know. But I came to have such respect for my grief. And I feel like even through that process, I was like, oh, I think there was secretly a fear that if I felt grief, I would stay undone and unable to be with anything good in life or and like, actually it was the contrary. It was like keeping me from feeling deep connection or love because I was like so protected. So, yeah, I feel like this conversation has been such a big reminder of that. Just like, yeah, grief and gratitude. There is a way that they coexist. Of course, I'm always like, I don't mean be grateful that you lost your person, but there is something that's like, God, and we got to have that time together that we had, or I had that moment before I was 8 where my dad was my whole world. And so we got that. And I can, in my grief, actually remember that in a way that I was like staying away because that was a hard loss. Yeah. In that time of my life.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful.
That's so beautiful. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Well, we are being gifted one more poem from Moudi. So we would love to leave our listeners with that being the last thing. So Rebecca and I will say goodbye, and then Moudi is going to poet gift us out.
All right. I'll preface this by saying the donkey in me honors the donkey in you.
Habibi, my donkey loves your
Habibi,
donkey.
yes. Our donkeys are friends.
Our donkeys are such good friends.
Okay. Heart donkey. And if the heart were an animal, certainly it would be that stubborn, large-faced servant with its antenna ears and a loyalty so determined to pulse each hoof forward, one in front of the other, carrying the weight of your life out to the field, I imagine, where it may finally kneel in that grass, and having no ambition left, roll in its brayerful of delight, its begging eyes full of that sweet, delicious darkness.
Thank you.
Thank you both. This is an honor.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of All the Grief. You can find us on Instagram at All the Grief Pod. And please take a moment to rate our podcast and share us with your friends. We'd love to keep expanding our reach to all the people who could benefit from conversations on grief. Take care.